Have you noticed the pattern? The people working 80-hour weeks talk constantly about how hard they work. The people building generational wealth barely mention hours at all. Warren Buffett's competitive advantage isn't effort. It's that he's been reading annual reports for 70 years while everyone else chased quarterly wins. Naval Ravikant built his wealth through one tweet thread and years of compounding insights, not by outworking anyone. Paul Graham wrote essays for a decade before Y Combinator made him wealthy. The essays were free. The thinking compounded. What do they understand that you're still trying to brute force? You know that panic when you check your bank account and realize another month passed without real progress? You know that shame when someone younger announces their exit while you're still grinding? You know that voice at 2 a.m. asking, "Everyone else figured this out, why haven't you?" How many times this week did you think, "I'm doing everything right. Why isn't it working?" Let me ask you something. What if hard work was never the answer? Here's what's actually happening. You're not failing because you don't work hard enough. You're failing because hard work is the wrong variable entirely. The problem isn't effort, it's substrate. What you're building on determines everything. Marcus Aurelius saw this pattern in Rome, not with startups, not with content creators, but with soldiers. Men who trained harder than anyone, who sacrificed more than anyone, who bled for Rome and died broke, while merchants who never held a sword retired wealthy. Same empire, same opportunities, completely different outcomes. Why? The soldiers optimized for effort. The merchants optimized for leverage. Marcus wrote something that explains your entire situation. You could be good today, but instead you choose tomorrow. Read that again. You keep optimizing the wrong thing. More hours, better habits, stronger discipline. All of it built on a foundation that doesn't multiply. Here's the invisible prison. You were taught that work is the currency. First day of school, hard work pays off. First job, put in your time. First business advice, hustle harder than everyone. But that's not how wealth actually builds. Effort is capped at 168 hours per week. Leverage has no ceiling. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. Person A works 70 hours per week, building skills, delivering excellence, completely committed. Person B works 30 hours per week, building systems that multiply effort, creating assets that work while they sleep. After 5 years, person A, $180,000 saved, exceptional at their craft, completely exhausted, one injury or burnout away from losing everything. Person B, $420,000 saved, good at their craft, well-rested, income streams that survive them, taking a month off. What's the difference? Person A built a job. Person B built a machine. Person A is the asset. Person B owns assets. Seneca, who built significant wealth as a Roman advisor and investor, wrote, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." But here's what he really meant. Preparation without positioning is just expensive practice. You can be the best in the world at something nobody will pay for. You can work harder than everyone in an industry with no leverage. You can be brilliant in a game where brilliance doesn't compound. The question isn't, how hard are you working? The question is, what are you building that works when you don't? And most people never ask it because they were taught that asking it is lazy, that real success requires suffering, that if it feels easy, you're probably cheating. You know that guilt when you stop working? Like rest is betrayal? Key, that's not ambition, that's programming. But every wealthy person I've studied has one thing in common. They found a way to get paid multiple times for work they did once. Writers write one book, sell it for decades. Investors make one decision, compound it for lifetimes. Creators make one course, sell it while they sleep. Founders build one system, scale it to millions. Same 24 hours as you, different architecture underneath. Real math. Someone working 70 hours per week on client work has a maximum earning of their hourly rate times 70 hours. Vacation cost, zero income. Sick day cost, zero income. Ceiling, whatever hours they can sustain before collapse. Someone working 30 hours per week building leveraged assets earns money that compounds over time, independent of hours. Vacation, income continues. Sick days, income continues. Ceiling, distribution, not stamina. One is trading time for money. One is trading time for assets that generate money. These are not the same game. But here's what really costs you. Every hour you spend working in your life is an hour you don't spend building leverage for your life. Every client you take to pay the bills is a decision not to build something that escapes billing entirely. Every urgent task you complete is a long-term system you postponed. You're not building slowly. You're not building at all. You're operating. An operation doesn't compound. Marcus Aurelius watched the best soldiers in history give everything to Rome. They were brave, disciplined, relentless, and they died with nothing. Because courage doesn't compound. Discipline doesn't compound. Effort doesn't compound. Only leverage compounds. You know that exhaustion you feel? That's not from working hard. That's from working on things that reset to zero every Monday. How much longer will you trade your years for someone else's quarterly goals? Epictetus, who went from slave to philosopher, said something that explains why you're stuck. No man is free who is not master of himself. Translation: if your income requires your constant presence, you're not free. You're self-employed slavery. And this is where everything shifts, because the solution isn't working less. It's working on different things entirely. But here's what really stops people. Not lack of knowledge, not lack of effort. Something deeper that keeps them trapped even when they see the exit clearly, even when they understand the game. That's what we're solving next. Naval Ravikant said something that changed how I think about wealth. You're not going to get rich renting out your time. Not because renting time is wrong, because it doesn't scale. There's no version of work harder that gets you to wealthy. Wealthy requires leverage. And leverage comes in exactly 4 forms that every wealthy person throughout history has used in some combination. Paul Graham, who built Yahoo Store, then ViaWeb, then Y Combinator, has funded over 2,000 companies. Know what he looks for? Not work ethic, leverage. Here's what separates builders from operators. The first form of leverage is labor. Other people's time multiplies yours. One person working 40 hours produces one person's output. One person leading 10 people working 40 hours produces 10 people's output. Same hours from you, 10x result. But labor leverage requires management skill, cash flow to pay people, and systems to coordinate effort. This is hard leverage, expensive to build, slow to scale. The second form is capital, money that makes money. $100,000 in an index fund at 10% annual return becomes $672,000 in 20 years without you touching it. Same money, no additional hours. But capital leverage requires capital to start with, knowledge to deploy it, and patience to let it compound. This is powerful leverage, but most people don't have the starting capital. The third form is code, software that runs 24/7 without you. Write it once, deploy it globally, scale to millions. A developer makes one app, 1 million people download it, same effort, million-person impact. But code leverage requires technical skill, distribution, and product-market fit. This is scalable leverage, but requires specific knowledge. The fourth form is content, ideas that multiply through media. Write one essay, 1 million people read it. Same effort, million-person impact. Record one video. It plays forever. Same effort. Infinite playback. This is permissionless leverage. Anyone can build it. This is what I'm using right now. And this is the one most people can access without capital, without managing people, without coding. But here's what really matters. You can't build leverage part-time while working full-time on non-leverage work. The math doesn't allow it, and that's the trap most people die in. If you work 60 hours per week on client work, you have maybe 10 hours for leverage work. 60 hours creates immediate income but zero compounding. 10 hours creates zero immediate income but potential compounding. You will always prioritize the 60 because rent is due Friday. This is the trap. The only way out requires a sequence that most people refuse because it's uncomfortable for 18 months. Here's phase 1. Reduce consumption. Your overhead determines your freedom. If you need $8,000 per month to survive, you need to work enough to generate $8,000 per month. If you need $3,000 per month to survive, you can take risks someone at $8,000 cannot. Lower overhead equals higher optionality. Seneca practiced this monthly. He would live like he'd lost everything to remind himself that poverty wasn't actually terrifying. Not because he was cheap, because psychological freedom from consumption is leverage too. Cut your burn rate by 40%, not forever, just for 18 months. That 40% becomes your leverage fund. Not money saved, time bought. Phase 2 is build while you work. You can't quit to build. That's romantic, but irresponsible. You build leverage in the margins until the margins become the center. Paul Graham built ViaWeb at night while consulting. Naval built AngelList while working full-time. Every successful founder I know built their next thing while their current thing paid bills. Here's the allocation. 40 hours goes to work that pays bills immediately. 10 hours goes to work that compounds. That 10 hours is sacred, not when you feel like it. Scheduled, protected, non-negotiable. During those 10 hours, if you're building labor leverage, you document your process, hire your first part-time assistant, and systemize one task per week. If you're building capital leverage, you save 30% of income, learn investing fundamentals, and make your first small bet. If you're building code leverage, you learn to build, ship one small tool, and solve one problem for yourself first. If you're building content leverage, you create consistently with one essay, one video, one post every week without exception. You will suck at first. That's the point. Sucking while employed is free. Sucking while unemployed is expensive. Phase 3 is recognize the inflection. You don't quit your job when leverage feels comfortable. You quit when leverage produces enough income to cover your reduced burn rate. If you cut expenses to $3,000 per month and your leverage work generates $3,500 per month consistently for 6 months, that's the signal. Not $10,000 per month. Not feeling ready. Math. Just math. For most people, this takes 18 to 36 months of unglamorous parallel work. Not sexy, but it's how wealth actually builds. How many people do you know who are willing to work 2 jobs for 18 months with no visible progress? That's why most people stay trapped. Phase 4 is scale the engine. Once leverage pays your bills, every hour you add to it multiplies. You're not working more hours. You're working on things where hours multiply. One great essay reaches millions. One great product serves thousands. One great system runs without you. Same effort input, exponentially different output ceiling. What happens month by month? Month 6, still exhausted, still working 2 jobs. No visible progress. This is normal. Month 12, your leverage work has an audience. Small, but real. You're less panicked about money because burn rate dropped. Month 18, your leverage work generates $1,000 to $2,000 per month. Not enough to quit, enough to see it's real. Month 24, your leverage work matches your bills. You quit the job, you go full-time on leverage. Everything accelerates. Month 36, you've built something that works when you don't. You sleep 8 hours, you take vacations, your income grew while you slept. This isn't theory. This is the only pattern I've seen work consistently across industries, ages, backgrounds. But here's what really happens when you do this. When you make this transition, people will misunderstand you. They'll say, must be nice to work from home. They won't see the 18 months you worked 50-hour weeks building in the cracks. They'll say you're lucky. They won't see the 200 pieces of content nobody watched before one hit. They'll say, I could never do that. What they mean is, I'm not willing to suck at something new while being good at something old. Are you willing to be invisible for 18 months to become inevitable? After? Let me be direct. They'll call it luck because calling it structure means they'd have to change. Your leverage will look like luck to people who optimize for effort. Your calm will look like laziness to people who worship exhaustion. Your freedom will look like privilege to people who chose golden handcuffs. Not because they're bad people, because their identity is wrapped in the grind, and your existence outside the grind threatens that identity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The obstacle is the way." But here's the real translation. The thing preventing you from building leverage is the thing you need to address first, not motivation, structure. Seneca said it even more directly. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor. Translation. Wealth isn't income. It's freedom from needing income. So here's your permission. You don't owe anyone 70-hour weeks. You don't owe anyone an explanation for building leverage quietly. You don't owe anyone participation in the hustle performance. You're not selfish for reducing consumption to buy freedom. You're not lazy for working on things that compound. You're not ungrateful for leaving jobs that don't build equity. But you do owe yourself this question. What am I building that works when I don't? If the answer is nothing, you're not building wealth. You're renting survival, and the rent comes due every 2 weeks forever. Here's your choice. You can optimize effort for the next decade and stay on the treadmill, or you can spend 18 months building leverage and step off entirely. Most people will choose neither. They'll just complain about the treadmill. Some will try to optimize effort harder. They'll burn out within 3 years. Few will build leverage methodically. They'll be unreachable within 3 years. Which one are you? If you're ready to stop trading time for money and start building assets that compound, write this in the comments. I'm building leverage. This channel is for people who understand wealth as architecture, not effort. Not louder, more leveraged. Next video, why discipline fails and what Marcus Aurelius built instead. Paul Graham built Y Combinator after decades of building leverage engines. Naval built Angel Lists the same way. They didn't work harder. They worked on things that multiplied. You're doing the same now. One question before you go. What's the one thing you could build in the next 18 months that would work when you don't? That's your answer. Build it.